Okay, so before we close the book on this story, the other interesting thing is that during that recording session with the string players, one of them said at some point, shouldn't this notation be in 6/8? And I was like, no, what are you talking about? From the very first moment that I ever wrote this arpeggiated part, I had always conceived of it in 3/4. So in my head it sounded like 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. But it turned out that everybody else in the band, all the string players, nearly everybody that I talked to after writing this song was hearing it in 6/8, which means they heard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. As a result, because the musicians who were recording this track were hearing it in different time signatures, it ended up being kind of polyrhythmic because we were playing different parts in different time signatures. So the piano part that I played at the end is clearly 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And the vocal line makes more sense in 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But there are synth parts and other elements that Dave was playing that are clearly in 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what do you think? Is it 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3? Or is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4? It really could go either way, and that's what makes music beautiful. See you next time. Hey guys, it's Ben. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for tuning into our story yesterday about our biggest fight ever as a band, where we couldn't agree on whether the song was in 3/4 or 6/8. I was just blown away by the number of people who voted, gave their input, commented, got into some really thoughtful discussions with us online. And I wanted to do a little follow-up story because I had a handful of people ask me about the difference between 3/4 and 6/8. They are two time signatures that get confused a lot, but not for the reason that they got confused on that song. So if you didn't catch the story, you can see it in our highlights. If you go to our profile and click on episodes, it is episode 2, part B, where we're talking about kind of different Easter eggs and fun facts about the music that we're making and our creative process. But I thought I'd just take a few minutes to walk through what 3/4 and 6/8 actually are, how they're structured, why they often get confused, and just kind of get down in the weeds for all of you folks who love this stuff as much as we do. So I've taken a few minutes to write down 3/4 and 6/8 on this piece of paper using a simple Sharpie and a basic form of notation. I'm not sure if this is a formal system of notation that I saw somewhere and am now subconsciously recycling without knowing it, or if I've just made this up, but it is an easy way for me to think about strong and weak beats in any given time signature. So this top line is 3/4, which, as you may have guessed, has 3 primary beats. If you ignore these small lines, the primary beats are this strong downbeat and these two equal but slightly weaker beats. 3/4 is what's known as a simple meter. We know this because of the 4 on the bottom, and simple means that each beat is subdivided into 2. So there is an and that falls in between each of the primary beats. So this all comes together to sound like 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now 6/8 is what's known as a compound meter, and we know this because of the 8 on the bottom. And 6/8 is actually known as compound duple, duple meaning 2. So even though there are the same number of eighth notes in a measure as with 3/4, there are only 2 primary beats, the strong downbeat and then this slightly weaker beat. But each beat is subdivided into 3, which means that there are 2 ands in between. And so it ends up sounding like 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, or as you heard me counting yesterday, 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now the reason that 6/8 and 3/4 so often get confused is because of situations like these. If you line up 2 measures of 3/4 next to each other, it looks awfully similar to 6/8. And the only way to tell a difference is that you will hear this beat is slightly weaker than this beat because it is more like 2, 1 and 2. Whereas in 3/4, these beats would be equal. So easy trick, if you're listening to something and you're trying to tell if it's 3/4 or 6/8, because both of them have kind of a bop, 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 kind of waltz feel, you will know it's 6/8 if a snare or something like that is falling on this beat while a kick is falling on this beat, because it's indicating that this beat is slightly weaker. Whereas in 3/4, you're going to have the same kind of instrumentation or equal strength, maybe like a kick on both of these beats. Now, as I said before, 6/8 is actually more closely tied to 2/4. So there is another compound meter or time signature, which is the counterpart to 3/4, and that is 9/8. So if you look at 3/4 and 9/8, you'll see that the primary beats are the same, but 9/8 is subdivided into 3, so it sounds like 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so it's like a waltz on steroids. It's like a big waltz with little mini waltzes in between. And then of course you have 12/8, which is essentially the same as 4, but you have two beats in between each beat. So it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So anytime you're dividing a beat into 3, it always has a tendency to start sounding like 3/4 and getting confused with 3/4. So again, you just have to be listening for, outside of every 1, 2, 3, are we coming back to an equal beat, something that's just as strong, or is it slightly weaker? Are there 2 slightly weaker, or is it slightly weaker and slightly stronger, slightly weaker, so on and so forth. So you get the idea. Now, the whole issue that we were running into with You Can't Be What You Say All the Time was not that issue. We're not looking at a situation of understanding, the strength of beats. We were actually looking at this situation here with the same number of eighth notes in a given measure. But what was happening is that while I was hearing 3/4, I was also hearing a syncopation on this beat here. So it would sound something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3. And because there was no drum kit or anything to really hit home this strong 3 feel, that syncopated beat was coming off as a stronger beat than the others, which is why so many, in fact the majority of people who voted yesterday were hearing the song in 6/8, because they were not hearing these as the strong beats, but they were hearing this or this as the strong beat. So again, it all kind of just depends on what you listen to. There were piano parts that were emphasizing these notes, and then there were synth parts that was emphasizing this note. There is a subtle kick drum really low in the mix that is also emphasizing these notes. But again, that's why it makes it so easy to go either way and argue that the song is in either one of these time signatures, because really all of these beats are being accented, but they're being accented by different instruments and in different ways. Alright guys, I know that was way down in the weeds, but I love this kind of stuff, so I hope some of you enjoyed it. I'm sure our engagement was just like crashing all the way through as more and more people were just like going to the next story. But thanks to all of you who did make it here to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and that maybe some of you learned something new, or yeah, hit us up in our messages, let us know your thoughts. Maybe you have other opinions, or can teach us a thing or two. But yeah, have a good night.